Hey guys, thanks for tuning in today. Today we're going to be having a look at some servos. I've decided to go ahead and build myself a new long range plane, and basically I'm just starting to acquire some parts and just go through a few testing procedures. So basically I don't really like ordering from Hobby Key anymore. I think their service sucks. So just wanted to try something different. I've always used my trusty HXT 900 Hextronic servos. Bang for buck, these have been awesome over the years. I've had a few break, I've had a few jitters, but I decided I wanted to try something Metal Gear. So I've decided to go ahead and buy these Towerpro Mg90s servos from Banggood. So I just wanted to do a bit of a comparison for my old favourite to the new ones I've bought, and let's see if they're any good, basically. So, alright, what do we want to test first? Let's have a look at our weights, basically. We're looking at, I'll just move that camera a little bit, there we go, 11.6 grams. Alright, now let's try the Towerpro. Okay, so 13.2 grams, a little bit heavier, not a massive amount, but if weight's a massive issue for your craft, okay, that's one thing. Okay, so next we're going to have a look at cable length. That might be a bit of an issue depending on your install. On our Towerpros, we're looking at approximately 25 centimeters or 250 millimeters of length on our cable, and on our HXT we're looking about the same, so no difference there. So alright, I guess the next thing we'll do is plug these things in and let's have a bit of a look. Okay, for this test I'll be using the new Towerpro servo. I'll be using my old Turnigy servo tester. Great little tool. That way it sort of takes out any kind of, have you program your radio correct, are you getting full throw, is there any other issues? This has been a pretty rock solid test device. I've been very happy with that over the years. Just using an old ESC to power the servo tester. One other thing I have done is I've also plugged in my old Turnigy watt meter, so I can have a look and see if there's much difference in the current draw. And I'm just using Dynegy 3-cell, probably way over spec for this for my testing, but if you're interested in what I'm using for the testing, that's it. So let's see how much sort of travel we're getting out of this. Doesn't look like it's actually much more than about 90 degrees there for the travel, so that's actually quite a small amount of travel. One thing I am noticing is it's very, very smooth. I'm seeming to having quite a lot of resolution in between each step. I know this is unloaded, so it's a little bit hard to tell. So I'm just going to put a little bit of downward pressure on this to load it up a little bit. It doesn't really seem to be struggling. I'm pushing this quite hard, and it doesn't really seem to be struggling with the movement there, so that is actually doing quite well. So let's try it in automatic mode. I'm increasing the pressure on my thumb. That is really doing well. I'm putting a lot of pressure on that now, and it's still going through. So let's have a bit of a look at our peak power. Okay, so 0.53 amps peak, so that's a good test. Alright, let's move on to the HXT. Okay, so we've hooked up our HXT, and instantly, the second I've hooked this up, I can hear a little bit of buzzing, and also as I'm moving this, it seems to be a lot grainier on the steps, and it doesn't really seem to have any more or less throw. It really looks like we're getting around about the same sort of 90 degrees throw out of these servos. So That seems about right. Alright, so let's put it into automatic mode again. And it just sort of seems to me on automatic mode, this is a little grainier. You can actually hear the steps. It's nowhere near as smooth. Let's load this up a little bit and see how good it does. Yeah, okay, that's doing fine. It's getting through that without too many dramas. Putting a lot of pressure on that there. Okay, now let's check our peak. Wow, look at that. 0.24 of an amp peak. That is a lot less power. So if you're running 5 or 6 of the servos in your craft, that is going to make a massive difference to whatever bec you're using. So that might be a bit of a consideration if you're using, say, like a 1 amp non-linear bec in your craft and you've got 4 servos. This will be fine. If you're using this, wow, you're probably going to get some brownouts. So you probably want to be using at least a 2 amp bec if you're planning on going to the Mg90s. So that was a bit of a good little test. So let's plug them in at the same time and see if we can sort of see any differences when they're sitting next to each other. I'm just going to hold one above the other. There we go. So we can sort of see if there's much different. Seem to be getting around about the same sort of travel, really not much in it. Just going to do this quickly back to back, sort of this HXT does seem quite steppy and grainy. That's really not very nice at all. Where the Towerpro just seems a lot smoother and nicer. It's just really happy with that. Alright, I guess the next thing is let's pull this servo apart and let's have a look at the insides. So when you are on the Banggood website and you're looking for these Towerpro servos, there is quite a few of these servos called Mg90, and they all seem to be very similar, but when you read the descriptions, there is some differences on bearing materials and gear materials and those sorts of things. So when you are buying these servos, just have a good look. This is basically the cheapest one they sell. I think I got 6 of these delivered to the door for well under $20 Australian, so not quite sure how they're doing it that cheap, but seems to be pretty good so far. So let's just take this out. So one of the things you're going to notice straight away is we're actually looking at a little M2 metric thread as opposed to the old this sort of just screw into nylon kind of thread. So that's a nice touch. You're not going to strip those out if you need to make some modifications, which is a nice thing. First thing you're going to notice when you pull the servo horn off, you can get that off, yep, got it off, is we're actually looking at an aluminium top collar. So that's a really nice top gear compared to the HXT. They've always a full plastic gear set. The gearboxes for those were always cheap to replace, so that was always a bonus, but yeah, I did have to go through quite a few of those gears. So alright, first gear's metal. Let's pull this apart and see how the rest of it looks. Okay, so we've taken the top cover off our new Towerpro servo, and what is really good is pretty much every gear in here is a metal derivative. So we've got aluminium, aluminium, it looks like a brass, aluminium, brass, aluminium, but this bottom gear here, plastic. So they've sort of cheaped out on this bottom gear. Not quite sure why they'd make one gear out of plastic. And this one here is also a brass. So that's a really good setup. It's a full metal gearbox, and that's obviously why it's a little bit heavier than the Hextronic. One thing that when you are looking through the specs on these Towerpro servos is some of the servos spec out a full proper bearing at the top, and this looks like it's only got a brass sleeve. I don't think it's going to make too much difference in this environment. I'm not looking to use this on a cyclic, on a helicopter or anything like that. It's just you know, for a return to home on a plane, I think it's going to function good enough, and maybe some stability out of the flight control. So I think in this case scenario, I don't think it's going to, you know, wiggle or deviate too much. So I'm happier. It's much better than the horrible plastic nothingness bearing that you get inside the Hextronic. So it is a good start. And for the price, I don't think they could go ahead and put a bearing in these. If you want the bearing version, it's about 1.5 times the price. One other thing I have sort of noticed is, like most manufacturers, they're really sparing on how much grease they go ahead and put in here. We've got one tiny spot there and one sort of tiny spot here. Realistically, it's probably not quite enough grease. So while I do have this open, I will probably put a little bit more, just a little bit more of lithium grease in here, and hopefully that prolongs the life. So all in all, so far, I'm really happy with these servos. I'll go through and test the 6 that I've got and see if any of them are, you know, deviating or sort of going ahead and, you know, vibrating or any of those sorts of problems before I go ahead and put them in the plane. But so far, so good. I think it's a pretty worthy upgrade from the HXT 900s. The only way to tell is put a few hours of flight down these servos, and I guess we'll see. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully it's helped you out and you guys get to try out some new little servos. Have a nice day. Ciao.